The flickering candle gave off a faint light, printing a crooked shadow on the white wall. This is a room in the academic tower of the capital of the Gabella Empire. An old man with all white beard and hair is buried in a large pile of books, and among the scrolls, I read page by page carefully, as if searching for some information. The bell of the big clock tower came from outside, and the simple and melodious sound echoed over the entire city, announcing the arrival of midnight, but the old man continued to bury his head in the pile of books as if he didn't hear it. The door of the room not far away quietly opened, and a young man with a candlestick came in. He said softly, "Teacher, it's already midnight, you should really rest." "What, is it already this time?" Only then did the old man close the tome in his hand, took out his handkerchief and rubbed his sore eyes. "It's time for a good night's sleep. Help me, this body is getting more and more useless." The young man put down the candlestick and slowly helped the old man up. "At today's imperial meeting, everyone was very curious about what you were doing these days, and even His Majesty asked me again in private." "Haha, for you, it must be scratching your head to make up a suitable reason for me on the spot, right?" The young man named Mond mumbled in embarrassment, "Is that shooting star a few days ago really worth so much attention?" As soon as he said these words, the smile on the old man's face froze immediately, and the slight frown between his brows showed that his heart was no longer calm. "Sorry, I shouldn't have doubted you." Seeing the old man's dignified expression, Mond showed shame on his face. "Oh, Mond, I'm not blaming you, it's a good quality to be able to question boldly," the old man quickly comforted. "Indeed, this meteor makes me worry all the time, and I hope that I worry too much. If unfortunately, it really brings disasters as recorded in the ancient scrolls, then according to the previous descriptions, this catastrophe will far exceed our imagination. Let me tell you about the previous few times." Then, he spread out a roll of parchment and began to slowly talk about what he had gained in the past few days. In a dark alley next to the great bell tower of the imperial capital, accompanied by the still reverberating bell, a black figure walked in silently. He was wearing a cloak, and walked slowly towards the depths of the alley with the moonlight on his back. In the shadows under the hood, at the first corner, he stopped. "Why are you here so late today?" A rough voice sounded, and another man in a cloak was already waiting there. His face was also hidden under the hood, and a thick beard was faintly revealed. "It's going to be windy, make more preparations." "What preparations have you made?" "Rope, canvas, and harpoons." The bearded man nodded and said, "With these, you can go to sea with peace of mind. Go, we will always pray for you in the church at the port." Then he flashed into the shadows and disappeared, and the cloaked man who came first also left after confirming that there was no abnormality around him. In the bachelor's tower, the old man's narration has ended for a while, but cold sweat oozes from Mond's forehead. After being silent for a long time, Mond finally spoke, "If this is the case, should we immediately report to His Majesty and warn the world?" "No, we don't know anything about the disaster itself. We don't know what form it will take, and when it will come. We also lack effective countermeasures. It is useless to disclose it too early. On the contrary, it will cause panic in a large area, and even give some people with ulterior motives an opportunity to take advantage of it." "You are right, I was too reckless." The old man's disciple was a little ashamed. The old man opened the window, and a gust of fresh air quickly poured into the room. He looked out the window at the low night, and said in a loud voice, "It's going to be windy." The bitter cold wind was swirling in the dark night sky. It was already late at night, but the master bedroom in the Lord's castle of Hyuxin town was still brightly lit. On the big bed in the bedroom, lay a chubby black-haired boy, about 10 years old, but unconscious at the moment. Not far from the big bed, Philip, the housekeeper of the castle, was worried, and looked at the boy lying on the bed for a while. "Boy, look at the busy priest next to the bed for a while." Finally, the priest stopped moving, and the butler couldn't bear the anxiety in his heart, and immediately asked, "Father Anderson, how is the young master?" The priest turned around and said with an apologetic expression, "Housekeeper Philip, unfortunately, the medicinal herbs that were applied before in the holy water just fed seem to have no effect on Master Paul's illness. Now I have only one trick left, I don't know. Do you agree to give it a try? May I ask what the method is?" "Bleeding therapy, I learned this from a traveling healer. According to him, this therapy has been popularized in most areas of Gabella Empire and Roman Kingdom, and it has miraculous effects on some special diseases." Bleeding. Butler Philip's eyes darkened when he heard the word. He pondered for a while, finally gritted his teeth and said, "Okay, Father Anderson, just do as you say." "Okay, may the Lord of Light bless Master Paul." The priest held out his hands and prayed to his God, and then he told Philip to find a brass basin and put it under the bed, and he took a sharp knife from the box he carried with him, and took the boy's arm from under the quilt. About to move the knife. Just after the priest pressed the knife to the skin of the boy's arm with his right hand, he suddenly felt the boy's pulse beat with his left hand holding the boy's arm, and then began to beat continuously and strongly. Father Anderson, who noticed something strange, put down the knife and continued to observe. The boy's pulse gradually stabilized, and then his eyelids slowly opened. "Bless the Lord of Light!" Father Anderson and Butler Philip shouted out in surprise at the same time. "Oh my God, what smells so bad?" The boy opened his eyes and said something that the two people in front of him couldn't understand. After the vision was fully restored, the boy sat up, and then he was in a dazed state. Zhao Kai, an ordinary Chinese programmer, likes to read some messy online novels on weekdays. What makes him quite unhappy is that the novels he pursues are always very niche, and authors who lack motivation often write less than 100 chapters. Changing every month changing every year, or simply eunuchs, but those little white texts in his eyes are flooding. Although there are some masterpieces that are both popular with the public and suitable for him, firstly, the number is too small, and secondly, there are always regrets of one kind or another in the content. Finally, one day, he decided to write a novel by himself, and made up his mind that even if no one read it, he would keep writing it to make up for all the regrets in the past. As for the subject matter of the novel, as a loyal believer of the Chinese Industrial Party, it is natural to write about using the guns and cannons on the science side to crush the dregs of the other world on the magic side. Goldfinger didn't want to make it too obvious, so he had to let the protagonist climb the technology tree from scratch, so he spent a lot of energy collecting those sacred books and materials that are called necessary for time travel. What is the Barefoot Doctor's Handbook that buys people's hearts? Ashokara's Farmland Water Conservancy Practice, and Pingtiangxia's military training course, in short, the more the better. After careful study for half a month, I finally decided to start writing. But what was unexpected was that after working for many years, his writing ability had deteriorated to such an extent that he scratched his head for a long time just writing the beginning. Fortunately, I still despise other people's writing as Xiaobei Wen. Zhao Kai was very ashamed. He decided to stay up all night and finish the first chapter. After barely putting together the first chapter, he couldn't stand the drowsiness anymore, and fell asleep lying in front of the computer. In a daze, a pungent smell hit him, pulling his consciousness back from sleep, but he didn't expect that after opening his eyes, the whole world changed. Zhao Kai, or the current Paul Grayman, is currently looking around with question marks in his head. Luxurious carpets, furniture made of precious wood, artistic wall decorations, and soft mattresses under the buttocks, isn't this the protagonist's bedroom he described in the first chapter of the novel? What happened to him? He pinched the flesh on his face, it hurt, it didn't look like he was dreaming. Young master, you are finally awake. Please rest assured, this is definitely not in your dream. Philip, the housekeeper, hurried up. Only then did Paul notice that there were two other people in the room. The person who just came over had slightly grey hair, was tall and thin, and looked about 40 years old. He was wearing a black tuxedo, and he was dressed like a housekeeper often played in movies. The strange thing was that the other party clearly spoke a strange language. I can still understand it myself. The other, who appeared to be in his MID-30s, was wearing a toga with large sleeves and seemed to be some kind of clergyman. Where am I? Why is my body sticky? Only then did he realize that he was speaking the same strange language just now. Master, this is in your bedroom. You have Father Anderson's ointment on your body, so don't move violently. Master? Who are you? Seeing that the young master doesn't know himself, Yu reads www.yuyuganshu.com. Philip was a little at a loss, so he had to look to the priest, hoping to get an explanation from him. Mr. Housekeeper, don't worry, it's not uncommon to experience temporary amnesia after a coma. As long as you rest more and take care of your body, you can slowly recover with more guidance. It scared me to death. Yes, it's a great thing to wake up. Anderson continued to check on Gleeman. Physically there should be nothing serious, let Master Paul take a good rest today. The ointment should continue to be applied, and it will be cleaned up tomorrow. Well, I'm sorry to trouble you today, thank you very much. You're welcome, this is what I should do. I'll take my leave today, and I'll check on Master Paul tomorrow. Okay, this way please. Paul came to his senses a little at this moment, realizing the reality that he had traveled through. What happened? It was just a nap. Why did you time travel? What kind of is this a joke with me? He lay down again and forced himself to calm down. The priority now is how to survive in this new world. Looking at the posture just now, the status of this body is not low, and there should be no problem with food and clothing in the future. He has no memory of his own, but fortunately he can speak the language of this world. With the excuse of amnesia, he should be able to fool around. Thinking of this, he felt a little relieved. After a while, the housekeeper came back and straightened the quilt for him. Master, you can have a good rest tonight. If you have something to do, pull the bell rope next to the bed, and I will be in the next room. After finishing speaking, he stroked his chest with his hand. After slightly bowing and saluting, he left. Paul nestled under the quilt and began to think carefully about his future life. Paul Grayman yawned, then stretched. Master Paul, please forgive me for talking too much. Your actions just now are really inconsistent with your status as the heir of your family. The butler Philip next to him once again pointed out his gaffe. Here we go again. After slandering secretly, he straightened his body. Since waking up in the morning, whether it's dressing, washing, or eating, the butler has always been picky about his actions. By the way, the toothbrush and toothpaste used for washing turned out to be branches and salt, and the soap used to wash the face turned out to be made of pig pancreas, which was pure natural. The priest from last night just came again and left after confirming that he was fine. After waking up, there were many memory fragments from the previous body in his head. It seemed that he was the son of an earl, and some of his daily behaviors were no different from the ignorant dude in his previous life. Fortunately, his body hasn't grown up yet, so he hasn't done anything outrageous. Unfortunately, or fortunately for him now, the father of this body led the army to fight against pirates a few days ago. Perhaps the earl felt that his son, as the heir of the family, had reached the age when he should see blood, so he sent his son. He brought him with him, but unexpectedly he was caught in an ambush on the way. The earl died heroically in the breakout, and his son was hit on the head by a pirate's stone throwing and passed out. Thanks to the hard work of the family knights and guards, they finally managed to blaze a trail and return to the Lord's castle with the body of old Grayman and the comatose little master back. The young master continued to be in a coma and showed no sign of waking up. The castle had to hold a funeral for the old earl in the absence of the young master. By the time Paul woke up that night, it had been a whole week since he was injured. The butler began to try to help him recover his previous memories. He talked about a lot of past events, and he knew all the answers to all kinds of questions caused by amnesia, which saved him a lot of effort. You mean, my father and I were ambushed by pirates, and my father has already died? Yeah, those cursed, damned pirates who are going to hell. Young master, you must avenge the count. The master died tragically at the hands of the pirates, and he couldn't help but feel sad and burst into tears. Don't worry, father's revenge must be avenged. I can't wait to skin those pirates and eat their flesh. Of course Paul knew what to say now. Young master, those pirates have won by luck, and they are very arrogant now. Taking advantage of the fact that there is no leader in the territory, they went ashore and plundered many villages and towns. What will they call here? The knights have already arranged proper defensive measures. There is no danger in Hyuksan town at present. However, since you were in a coma before, everyone decided to wait for you to wake up before taking any further action. I have already notified the news of your awakening to the various managers in charge. People. They will come to visit in the afternoon. I think you should discuss the future countermeasures with them. You are right, Philip, but first take me to my father's grave to mourn. The voice, appearance of the old earl gradually became clear in his mind, and after learning of his death, a great sadness welled up in his heart inexplicably. With more and more memory fragments of Paul Grayman in his mind, he has been wondering whether he has been reborn from the house, or has recovered the memory of Zhao Kai in his previous life. After thinking about it, he is more and more inclined to the latter. If this is the case, let's live well in this world as Paul Grayman. I was negligent. Young master, your health has just improved, please don't be too sad. The cemetery is behind the castle, please follow me. In the afternoon, all the stewards who were still in Hyuksan town gathered in the castle hall. Due to the new funeral of the lord, the atmosphere in the hall was very gloomy. Everyone had sad faces. It could be seen that the old earl was still very popular. Paul was sitting in the lord's seat, feeling extremely nervous. On the one hand, he only had to take notes silently in the corner when he participated in the company's meetings before crossing. He had never had the experience of sitting on the rostrum under the gaze of everyone. On the other hand, looking at a room full of people in medieval costumes can't help but feel a little unreal. Ahem. He cleared his throat in embarrassment. The butler Philip stood aside and said, Master Paul has just recovered from a serious illness, and his physical condition is not very good. Now that everyone is here, let's discuss together how to deal with the current situation. Everyone started talking in twos and threes. Then let me say it first. I think it's time to regroup and teach the pirates a lesson. Now that they have gone ashore to loot everywhere, they have aroused a lot of public anger. If they continue to act recklessly, everyone here will continue to what face do you have to face the citizens. Finally, a strong man with a square face and a hulking waist stood up and expressed his opinion loudly. That's right. I second. The strong man's speech received a lot of support. It's unusual for the pirates to come ashore this time. I haven't seen such a large force. After the Earl was called by the Lord, the morale of the soldiers is very low. It is not appropriate to act rashly now. You should ask the neighboring lords for help as soon as possible. There are also opposing voices. Not to mention whether they agree or not, even if the nearest territory sends troops, it will take at least half a month, right? Soon everyone started arguing about these two viewpoints. Seeing them arguing, Paul wanted to intervene, but he didn't know what to say, so he had to drink from the glass on the table to cover up his embarrassment. Okay, everyone. The Chinese character face who spoke at the beginning suddenly stopped everyone from arguing. We should listen to the young master's opinion, and he will make the final decision. A slightly sinister man muttered, but he is only a half-grown child, what can he understand? Pay attention to your attitude. Paul Grayman is the sole legal heir to the territory, and the master we are about to swear allegiance to. Guo Zillion suddenly stood up and shouted at the person who questioned the young master just now, a group of people dressed as knights around him also glared at him, and some even put their hands on the sabers around their waists. The shady man was so frightened that he shrank his neck and lowered his head. It is not a pleasant thing to be stared at by a group of strong men, no matter what kind of meaning it is. Butler Philip hurried out to smooth things over. Now that the enemy is at hand, everyone should not fight among themselves. Young master, right? Yes, the more you have to be calm at this time, the more united you can get through the difficulties in front of you. It seemed that he couldn't help himself from speaking. Paul puffed out his chest and said loudly. He turned to the square face and asked, "So, who are you?" Bryce Alder, your marshal." Philip had already reminded everyone about the memory loss of the young master, so he didn't think about it with a square face and reported his identity. "How many troops do we have now?" "There are currently 263 soldiers in the territory who are worthy of a battle, including 15 knights and 20 followers. Many villages and towns have organized their own militias, with a total of about 300 people." "What formal military training? Are our soldiers a standing army?" I mean, do they train every day of the year?" "How is it possible? These people are the important labor force of the family. They work in the fields on weekdays. They are organized and trained once a month at least, and at most every quarter. Now they are called to Hyuksan town because of the pirate invasion." "How many pirates are there?" "According to the estimate at the time of the ambush, there were about 500 people. Based on past experience, it has never happened that pirates have penetrated into the interior on such a large scale. I know we are at a disadvantage now, but not all of them looted villages and towns. If we move out, we can also carry out an ambush to give them some color." Bryce once again promoted his view of taking the initiative to attack. "The current logistics, how long can the food last? There is no need to worry about this issue. On the one hand, the soldiers brought part of their rations when they were recruited. On the other hand, the food in the town is more than enough to feed hundreds of people. Besides, we are not under siege." The young master's few questions made everyone nod secretly, and also put away the vague contempt in their hearts. Although most of the questions gave people a feeling of deliberately pretending to be old-fashioned, some of them were really on the point. It seems that the young master didn't just know how to eat, drink and have fun like he usually did. He knew that after the old count left, the burden would fall on his shoulders. "How about this? Let's expand the army first, at least on the same scale as the pirates, practice for at least a month, and then find an opportunity to wipe out the pirates, and on the other hand, we should also send envoys to the neighboring territories for help." Someone proposed a compromise. "I think this idea is very good." Paul immediately slapped the table. He didn't want to give people an image of cowardice, and he didn't want to take risks. Now that he agreed and no one objected, we began to discuss some details of conscription. In the end, everyone began to discuss when the young lord would officially inherit the title and territory. Reasonably, Paul Grayman was the legal first-in-line heir, so there was nothing to argue about, so they quickly agreed. The keeper of the seal will personally go to the capital to report to the royal family, asking the king to issue a formal decree to recognize his title, and ask for some assistance to deal with the pirates. After the question and answer and discussion just now, Paul gradually got used to his new identity. After the tension disappeared, he quickly remembered the grand plan he planned most of the night last night. Facing a difficult territory and a group of people without a leader, they are just waiting for a man of destiny to turn the tide. Is there a better start than this? And there is no doubt that I am the man of destiny, otherwise, why would God let me travel here? The servant was thinking without blushing. The next step is to manufacture guns and artillery, blast furnace machine tools, reading www.yuyuganshu.com to build roads and railways, and to build giant ships and cannons like dumplings. Oh ha 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 ha, wait for me to wipe out the human kingdoms, punch the northern orcs, kicking southern elves. Hey? Orcs? Elves? When did I have more of these in my mind? Never mind, sooner or later they will all be turned into screws in the production of large machines. Take a small step to the electrical age, maybe you can still in my lifetime the day I saw the satellite go up into the sky. And I will leave my name in history, and be widely praised as the person who created a new era and changed the world. Come, the roar of the machine. Come, the chimneys. A vast virgin land is waiting for us to conquer. His flirting became more and more out of order, and he unconsciously showed a look of a pig brother. Everyone below, look at me, I look at you. The young master was fine just now, why did he suddenly suffer from hysteria? His body is still not in good shape, or something. Philip, the housekeeper who stood by, was extremely anxious. The young master's current expression was too embarrassing, and it was not easy to directly point out his impoliteness in public. Seeing that the corner of the young master's mouth was about to drip, he had no choice but to stretch out his hand and push his shoulder. Master! Master! If there is nothing else, let's leave first, and the knights are still going to inspect the various places. Defense! Hey? Oh, yes, let's do this for now, let's end the meeting today. Everyone then got up to say goodbye and started to walk out. Wait a minute, everyone! Just as everyone was about to walk out of the hall, a slightly immature voice came from behind. In view of the recent unstable morale of the army, the Lord has decided to hold a military parade in the central square on another day to boost the morale of our army. Good guy, once you have the power in your hands, follow the orders. You are not an official lord yet. Everyone complained in their hearts. Hansel Abbot, a noble baron of the kingdom of Aldo, at least in the eyes of the common people, he is indeed noble, but now he is running around with a group of ragged refugees on the muddy country road. God traitor, he muttered again. Just a week ago, Grand Duke Giles, known as Greedy Wolf, launched a rebellion. The king had been in a coma for many days because of a serious illness. Her Royal Highness, the only one who could suppress the rebellion, led her knights to the east. The Highlands drove out the barbarians who invaded the borders of the kingdom. Although the ambition of Grand Duke Greedy Wolf is known to all, the royal family's strategy towards him is still mainly to appease him. No one thought that the rebellion would happen so quickly. To make matters worse, in the eyes of the public, Sir Halls, the commander of the Royal City Guard who had always been loyal to the royal family, turned out to be a hidden chess piece buried in the royal capital by the Grand Duke. The Abbott family has always given people the impression that they are die-hard loyalists of the royal family. Hansel, who happened to be outside the city, was so frightened by the news that he didn't even dare to go home. He fled to the Highlands with his personal servant overnight. The order of the entire Jinjao area seemed to have collapsed overnight, and bandits from all walks of life seemed to appear overnight, and the city guards also began to raid the surrounding area, burning, killing, and looting. Due to the great reputation of the Grand Duke, a large number of civilians and small and medium nobles loyal to the royal family also began to flee to other places. Hansel heard some rumors intermittently from the refugees. After the rebel army rushed into the palace, it seemed that they could not find the king. The royal party got the news at the last moment before the rebellion. A large number of royal guards protected the king and some other important members who were still in a coma and ran from the north gate. Hansel had seen convoys with the royal family logo on the road, but he didn't follow them like those refugees who were eager to seek asylum. At this time, he was still waving through the city under the royal family's banner, and he faintly felt something was wrong. He is now leading his servant Tommen to another road. Of course, there are many refugees on this road. The carriage sank in a muddy place just now, and the servant Tommen pulled the horse's buttocks and did not pull the carriage out. Just as they were complaining about their bad luck, a group of passing robbers took the horse and what was left. A lot of money has been robbed, and all the Baron can do now is to curse the rebels who caused all this over and over again. Just when the master and servant were going to take a rest by the side of the road, an aristocratic carriage caught up behind them, and the family emblem on the carriage had been covered. When they passed by, there was a face in the car window that made Hansel's stomach queasy on weekdays, but now he felt a little inexplicably kind. "Hey, isn't this Abbott?" The gloating flash across the face of the other party completely wiped out the little intimacy just now. Even so, the group of heavily armed knights behind the carriage reassured him a lot, and he decided to take this carriage no matter what. "Dear Matthew, I met a bunch of shameless robbers before, for the sake of old friends, can you give me some help?" "Haha, what's wrong with this? Can I let my good friend, Baron Hansel Abbott, be mixed with a group of refugees in a stinking mud like now? If this gets out, it will be a bad image for our nobles. What a big blow!" The other party said loudly in a very exaggerated tone, and opened the car door, attracting a group of refugees who happened to pass by to stop and watch. "Thank you, I knew you wouldn't ignore your old friend." Hansel got into the carriage, and secretly vowed to ridicule the other party back when he was in trouble. Matthew Stallman, Hansel's classmate and his biggest rival in his entire school days, every time there is a debate match, he can always see the two people's tit-for-tat speeches. It is countless times to bury each other behind their backs, and each other rejects each other as sinister villains. Now, he had to escape with the help of his deadly enemy. The world is impermanent. Hansel sighed, and then thanked his mother and sister who were away to visit relatives not in the capital. "Okay, Hansel, don't make a sad face, and tell me what your plan is." After listening to Matthew's question, Hansel straightened his collar and regained some energy. At this time of turmoil in the kingdom, it is natural to go to the eldest princess to serve as a dog and a horse. Although my personal ability is low, but for the royal family it is my Abbott family's bounden duty to solve problems. Hey, it's still as grand as ever. Anyway, I have this plan anyway. My Stallman family's loyalty to the royal family has never been left behind. I wonder if Her Royal Highness will take us in when we go to the military camp. Hey, Matthew, where did you come from before you fled? I was checking the accounts at the manor outside the city, and I received a notice from my father, telling me to go to the Highlands and join the eldest princess. I saw the convoy with the royal logo on the road. Why didn't you follow? Didn't you follow? It's so chaotic, and it's so ostentatious. Do you think I'm a fool? You still look down on people like before. The two were talking without a word when the carriage stopped suddenly. You reading www.yuyuganshu.com. The two of them felt tense. Wouldn't they run into rebels and robbers? Someone outside the car shouted with a foreign accent, "Excuse me, are you from the Stallman family? Can you get out of the car and meet?" Matthew and Hansel had no choice but to get out of the car, only to see an old man standing beside the carriage on the side of the road, who bowed slightly and gave a noble salute. The old man introduced himself. "I am Baron Vaccalee Ford, Lord Sealkeeper of the Earl of Greymans on the northwest coast. On behalf of my lord, I would like to send my regards to you too." "Hi, I'm Baron Matthew of the Stallman family, and this is Baron Hansel of the Abbott family. What's the matter?" "I went to the royal capital to meet His Majesty the King because of territorial affairs, but along the way, I saw a large number of civilians fleeing north with their families. They all said that there was a rebellion in the royal capital, so I would like to ask you two about the specific situation." "Well, the honored guest came from afar, so he must not know about it. It's all because of Giles, who betrayed His Majesty the King." "Oh? Is that His Royal Highness the Grand Duke known as Greedy Wolf?" "Yes, now that the capital has been occupied by his accomplices, I advise you not to go. I haven't been to the capital for nearly 10 years, but unexpectedly encountered such a big event when I came here. Giles is really hateful." "That's right, the two of us were also afraid of falling into the hands of the rebels, so we planned to join Her Highness the eldest princess. She is now leading the army to drive out the barbarians in the Highland area. With Her Highness's ability, she should be able to return to the army to put down the rebellion soon." "I don't know His Majesty the King." "Your Majesty must have been rescued. If you wish, Lord Ford can go with us to find the palace of the great princess. Your Majesty contracted an illness not long ago, and has already handed over all matters to Her Majesty the Princess. Is that so? Well, I will trouble you two on the way. The territory in the northeast of the Kingdom of Aldo is adjacent to the highest mountain range in the known world, the Rocky Mountains. Between this majestic mountain range and the hinterland of the kingdom, there is a vast plateau, which people used to call the Eastern Highlands. One area also belongs to the kingdom, but there are scattered barbarian tribes, large and small, who do not obey the culture. Some of these tribes submit to the kingdom in name, while others are rebellious and often make trouble on the border. However, due to the complex terrain, difficult supplies, and altitude sickness, the kingdom has been unable to do anything about them. Fortunately, these tribes do not belong to each other, and they are in a state of disunity, relying on the mutual containment of those tribes who submit to each other. There is no major problem. But this year is different from usual. It is the time of spring plowing, and all the tribes, large and small, who have always been at odds with the kingdom, have come together to attack. The army stationed in the border area was caught off guard. When the news reached Jinjao Fort, the situation on the highland was already very corrupt. After an urgent discussion, the high-level officials decided that the eldest princess would personally lead the army to drive them away. Although everyone can see that something is obviously wrong, and I have never seen the barbarians work together like this, but it is too late to check carefully. Seeing the arrival of spring plowing, it would be terrible if the barbarians rushed into the hinterland of the kingdom. Cutting through the mess quickly is the right thing to do. The improvised barbarian tribal alliance is obviously no match for the well-trained regular army of the kingdom. After more than a month of fighting, the barbarians are about to be driven back to the plateau. It happened. Greed Wolf Giles reversed. At the place where the kingdom's army was stationed, a military meeting was going on in the heavily guarded central tent. Her Royal Highness, generals, that's all I know. I think everyone has a general understanding of the situation in the capital. A man with a mustache, hooked nose, and thin cheeks just finished introducing the latest information about Jinjao Castle. After that, everyone was silent for a long time, and only the sound of everyone's breathing could be heard in the quietness of the camp. After a long time, a voice broke the deadlock. Fortunately, His Majesty the King did not fall into the hands of the rebels. Is he safe now? Where is he? It was a young general who spoke, and his brown hair stood on the ground like steel needles. On the top of his head, even if he neglected to take care of it because he was busy with the war, it was hard to hide his heroic spirit. Please rest assured, His Majesty the King is safe now, and the court doctor and the imperial priest are also accompanying him to serve. Viscount Klein, the young general who asked the question just now, nodded, and did not delve into the second question just raised. Even the royal city guards, which have always shown their loyalty, were instigated. Who can guarantee that there is no one in this camp? 2 undercover agents. After the silence was broken, other people started talking. Please assign me an army immediately, and I will definitely smash this gang of rebels into pieces and regain the capital. You can't act rashly. The war with the barbarians is not over yet, so you must not disperse your forces. What? Are you going to let those run amok? Don't forget, there are a lot of military supplies in the capital, and they were all emptied by the rebels when they returned late. Cut, a bunch of idiots who don't understand strategy. What are you talking about? Lester, do you dare to fight us? Sitting at the top is a woman wearing knight armor, with dazzling bright golden wavy hair, and a face that can make people intoxicated without makeup. Catherine Rodney, the King of the Aldo Kingdom, Her Royal Highness. At this time, her pair of sword eyebrows were tightly knit together, and her blue eyes were fixed on the map in front of her. The quarrel among the generals didn't seem to affect her. After a long time, she raised her head and straightened her body. Everyone, as soon as she opened her mouth, the surroundings immediately fell silent. I think it's better to hear the reactions from other places in the kingdom first. Sir Merlin, Tell me what you know. Earl Merlin with mustache nodded to the princess and continued talking. At present, apart from those who have colluded with him before, no other nobles and forces have come forward to respond to Giles. This is also the most strange thing. With Giles' apparent strength, even a sneak attack like now, compared with us, the odds of winning are only 5,050. Moreover, Duke Dodge has clearly declared that he will be loyal to the royal family and will fight Giles to the end. Oh, that's great! Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. The territory of the Dodge family is located on the only way to the royal capital from the territory of Giles. With such a nail, the main force of Giles will not be very successfully supported the rebels in the capital. But unfortunately, with Giles' rebellion, many dark forces became restless. The pirates on the northwest coast and the bandits in the southern mountains suddenly became rampant, and the security of the entire kingdom began to be chaotic. At present many lords are preoccupied with their own affairs and are unable to withdraw to serve as the king for the time being. In addition, many people are obviously in a wait-and-see state, neither expressing their support for Giles nor explicitly expressing their support for the royal family. At both ends of the gang. They must not be spared. A general slammed the table in front of him fiercely. Do you have any good opinions on the next move? The princess in military uniform asked the generals. Klein pondered for a while and said, Your Highness, I think the first task is to recover the capital. If the king is not in our hands, the blow to the morale of the army and the people will be too great. Fortunately, the old Duke Dodge blocked the main force of Giles. It's a great opportunity for us. After hearing this, everyone echoed Klein's opinion. Catherine also nodded, expressing her approval for Klein. Then, she stood up slowly, with a trace of determination on her face, and all the generals focused their eyes on her. They knew that the princess had already made a decision in her heart. Lester, you immediately lead 1,000 cavalry day and night to choose a road to Dodgeland, and you must help the old Duke guard the pass. Yes, if the person is locked up, the person who is locked up will die. Horman, lead your people to the capital to investigate the situation of the rebels, and report any situation immediately. Yes. Don, inform Chief Gerav that he can act. After the matter is completed, he will be the Earl of the Highland officially recognized by the kingdom. I'll do it right away. The remaining people, act according to the plan set before. Be sure to end the war here within 10 days. Of order. The rest of the people responded in unison. Then the meeting came to an end, and everyone went back to assign their tasks. Only Earl Merlin was left behind, and he immediately knelt down to the princess on one knee after everyone dispersed. Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Your servant is incompetent. He failed to detect the information of the rebellion in time, causing the capital to fall and His Majesty to suffer. He really deserves death. You are indeed to blame. The princess looked at him with a stern look. Father entrusted you with a heavy responsibility and entrusted the kingdom's intelligence system to you, but you actually let the rebellion happen under your nose. The fall of the king's capital, let alone other impacts, is just a blow to the morale of the army. You know how big is it? How many family members of generals and soldiers live in the capital, do you know? Earl Merlin buried his head even lower, and he could feel the anger in the princess's eyes without looking. Please give me a death sentence, Your Highness. Enough is enough, now is not the time to discuss whether to punish or not. From now on, the intelligence system will focus on the Giles rebels, and no trace of their actions will be let go. Yes, I will definitely make amends, and there will never be such a big omission again. And those fools, you have to keep an eye on me. I don't want another rebel army to appear out of nowhere behind us. That's for sure, and I have one more suggestion about the local lords. Oh? Let's hear it. For those local lords who don't understand their attitude, we can catch them both openly and secretly. In the dark, I will deploy people to strengthen monitoring. In the open, we can send royal commissioners to their territories. On the one hand, we will publicize Giles' crimes along the way, and on the other hand, we will urge them. Hurry up and send troops to serve the king, first suppress them morally. This plan is good, let's do it like this. It just so happens that a large number of fleeing nobles from the royal capital came to the army in the past few days. The royal commissioner will choose from them, and you will be fully responsible for this matter. Yes, I'll arrange it now. It took Paul Grayman nearly a week to get familiar with and adapt to the daily work and life of a lord. During this period, his body's original memory was gradually restored. His territory belongs to the Kingdom of Aldo, which is the westernmost country in the known world. To the east of the kingdom, there are many human countries. Among them, the Gabella Empire is the most powerful. There are many dwarf clans living on the mountains. To the north of the Rocky Mountains is a vast prairie, where countless orc tribes are distributed. The rainforest, inhabited by elves known for their beauty and grace. What worried him a little was that there was a huge religious organization in this world, the Church, which had different official titles in different historical periods, and later people called it the Church directly. Its beliefs are spread across almost all human nations, and believers are even distributed among alien races. The priest who woke up that night was a priest of this religion. Based on his current memory, he doesn't know much about the past history of this religion, and he doesn't know if there is any dark history. But what is certain is that there are not many fanatical believers among humans, and I have seen several with my inexperienced experience. The land directly controlled by the Holy See is not much bigger than a principality, but its influence can be called calling the wind and rain. Isn't this a setting that has been used badly? Every crossing world has its shadow. I was already powerless to complain. In addition, there seems to be magic in this world, although most people, including nobles, have never seen a person who can use magic in their entire lives, and many people regard magic as nonsense. But his butler Philip swore frankly that he was saved from robbers by a mage when he was a child. According to Philip, the mage made a gesture with his left hand and muttered something, and then a big fireball shot out from the staff in his right hand, and smeared the face of the opposite robber with lightning speed. Well, since there are fantasy races like dwarves, elves, and orcs, the existence of magic is not out of the question. But he was more inclined to think that what the butler saw was something like a magic trick. On the first weekend after I woke up, the long-awaited military parade finally started. According to his request, the soldiers lined up in 3 squares and passed through the small square one by one under the command of the knights. "This is my soldier," the little earl said with a livid face. The soldiers in the phalanx wore miscellaneous clothes of all kinds. The only thing they wore in common was a piece of cloth armor with the family crest of the Graymans tattooed on it. At the beginning, the formation of the platoon was fairly neat, but after starting to march, the pace became chaotic. When he walked in front of him, the formation had become messy and sparse, and it was impossible to even see the formation. "It's been a long time. Gentlemen, it is necessary to raise our requirements for the quality of our army." After summoning the knights, the little earl said with a gloomy face. The knights were embarrassed for a while. "You looked at me, I looked at you, and finally Bryce stood up. "Ahem, Master Earl, it is like this, our place is relatively remote, and there is no coveting of other nobles, and the folk customs are simple and honest, so they are usually relatively lax in terms of armaments. To be honest, I didn't expect the pirates to attack so far from the coast this time. A lesson. Comrades, no, I mean gentlemen." The young lord looked up to the sky and sighed, with a heartbroken look, "The last failure is a lesson." The knights were even more ashamed. The death of the old earl always left a shadow in their hearts, so I decided that the recruits recruited this time will be personally supervised and trained by the lord. Paul took advantage of the situation. "Yes, Lord Earl." Although he had great doubts about how much the little lord knew about military affairs, the embarrassing performance of the military parade made the knights unable to muster up the courage to raise objections. In this way, another week passed, and a new round of conscription recruited a total of 315 new recruits. He decided to reorganize the army in the same way as the Earth Army before the crossing, so he announced his reorganization plan to the knights. The army is organized into 5 levels: regiment, battalion, company, platoon, and squad. The most basic class has 10 people in general. The department and the chief and deputy platoon commanders. One company has 3 platoons and 1 cooking squad, the company headquarters and the chief and deputy company commanders. One battalion has 3 companies under its jurisdiction, the battalion headquarters and the chief and deputy battalion commanders, and one regiment has 3 battalions under its jurisdiction. Set up the regiment and the deputy head. Corresponding to the organization, he imitated the military rank system of his previous life. According to the current organization, there are 2 levels of soldiers: private, 3 levels of non-commissioned officers, corporal, sergeant, and 3 levels of lieutenants, second lieutenant, captain, 3 ranks of school officer, major, lieutenant colonel. At the same time stipulates the corresponding relationship between military ranks and positions at all levels. He also stipulated that under special circumstances, for example, when the commander is unable to command the team due to injury or sacrifice, the order of transfer of command power should be transferred according to the position first, then according to the rank, and finally according to the length of service. As an example, once the company commander is injured and unable to command the battle on the battlefield, the deputy company commander will take over the command. If the deputy company commander also has an accident, the platoon leaders will take over the command of the entire company in order according to their rank. The ranks of the platoon leaders are all the same, so they are sorted according to their military age, and so on for other establishments. The knights were a little dizzy from these complicated titles. Some people suggested that the ranks of generals should be directly set to 4 levels: private, non-commissioned officer, lieutenant, and field officer, and each level should not be subdivided. There were hundreds of people, but was dismissed by the little count. He explained, although our army is still small, we must first set up a shelf anyway, so that in the future when we encounter more serious emergencies, we can expand. It's very convenient to get up. What a bunch of short-sighted guys, Paul said to himself. I haven't mentioned the names of division, army, group army, general, and marshal yet. The reason why a larger organization and a higher rank is not proposed now is that on the one hand, the current army size is too small, and on the other hand, he does not dare to do so. According to the current largest regiment level organization, if it is full, it will have to there are more than 1,000 people. For an earldom in a remote area, this is a considerable military force. If we propose a division-level organization of tens of thousands of people and a larger-scale military-level organization, it will be accepted by those who are interested if it gets out. Maybe it's a big hat that intends to rebel. You must know that a knight order in the capital has only more than 10,000 people, but you, a country lord, are clamoring all over the world that you want to support an army of 10,000 people. What do you want? In the same way, only those nobles in the capital who have fought for the country for a long time are eligible to be called generals. There are only 1,800 people in a gang, and the country knights who usually suppress bandits and pirates are each other's major generals. Admirals address to each other, how can we not justify it? There are also people who have objections to the fact that each company is assigned a cooking class, thinking that it is unnecessary. This will be the guarantee of our combat power. Speaking of the cooking class, Yu reading www.yuyuganshu.com saw the Lord suddenly became excited, stood up and danced, explaining its great significance, full of words that made the knights puzzled, but seeing that the Lord attaches so much importance to it, no one objected. In the end, Paul proposed to make the army regular, and he would pay a certain allowance as compensation for the loss of labor force of the soldiers' families. The knights had no objection to this point, since they spent the money of the Lord's mansion anyway. On the other hand, Steward Philip, who was standing aside, almost fainted. This time recruiting soldiers has already cost a lot of money, and the young master will increase the expenses, and it will be long-term. It seems that he has to find a time to persuade him. After the meeting, the thing that made Butler Philip even more distressed came. The young master actually asked him to be responsible for customizing 2 sets of clothes for each of the big soldiers, and it had to be done within a month. Although he tried his best to oppose the young master's waste of money, the young master repeatedly emphasized the importance of a uniform for a regular army, so he had no choice but to do it. This adaptation was repeatedly mentioned by historians and military strategists of later generations. It changed the old practice of simply dividing the army according to hundreds, thousands, and 10,000 troops. A series of organization concepts such as company, etc., together with the larger organization such as divisions and corps newly established by Paul in the subsequent military expansions, supplemented by the military rank system, constituted a complete military system. In particular, the introduction of the military rank system has made the army more tightly organized, so that the original commanders in the older army would not disperse once they die. In this new system, once such an accident occurs, the commanders will be automatically generated in order and continue to lead the troops to fight, ensuring the sustainability of combat effectiveness. Therefore, military historians unanimously regard this event as the beginning of the modernization of the army. On the second day after the meeting with the knights, Paul divided the troops according to his new establishment. There were nearly 600 new and old soldiers, and they were divided into 2 infantry battalions that were not full. After organizing the soldiers, he remembered that there was still a group of guards in the Lord's mansion. Being obsessive-compulsive, he decided to create an organization for them as well, and set up a separate unit, the Inner Guard. Following the armed police system of the previous life, the 2 levels at the lower level are still squads and platoons, and the upper levels are squadrons, brigades, and detachments, which correspond to companies, battalions, and regiments respectively. To save trouble, the same military rank system as in the army is also implemented. There were only 60 guards in the Lord's mansion, so they were organized into 2 platoons. As for the knights and their attendants, this is more difficult. After all, the knight class has already touched the threshold of the nobility, and according to his observations, the gap between the nobles and the commoners in this world is still quite large. It might cause their dissatisfaction in a system, and the Lord's seat under his buttocks has not yet been secured, but it feels weird to have such a considerable force separate them. So he went to Bryce for a secret talk first, and expressed his thoughts and concerns. Unexpectedly, Bryce blushed, saying that he was worrying too much, and explained it to him. It turned out that when the Grayman family was kicked to the northwest coast by the king, it had a strong dispensation nature. The previous vassals were either implicated and punished together, or they changed families to join others. Now the knights in the territory, how should I put it? Bryce stammered, it's a bit offensive to say, the family of the Lord was forbidden by the royal family at that time to confer new vassal nobles, although your ancestors gave us knights. However, our knight status is not recognized by the kingdom officials and other nobles. People generally call people like us wild knights. Except for knowing some characters and practicing martial arts, we are no different from ordinary people, and most people are also. I often work in the fields by myself. Then Lord Ford is. His title was inherited from a distant relative. Before inheriting the title, he had served the Lord's family for a long time. Moreover, he is a legal nobleman, which means he only has the title of nobleman, but he has no fiefdom. So that's the case, then it's up to you to pull them into the establishment. I think you are very prestigious among them. Where is it? I can just drink them all down on the wine table. Don't worry, I will definitely not disappoint the Earl. Bryce was sweating profusely, and responded with one gulp. Sure enough, as Bryce said, there was no conflict between the knights and their followers. Most of them were appointed as officers of all levels of troops. Bryce and another knight named Claude were respectively appointed as the first step. commander of the barracks and 2nd Infantry Battalion. Then a series of physical fitness tests were conducted to select the monitors of each class. Originally, I wanted to use the number of literacy as the biggest scoring item in the selection, but after asking hundreds of people, almost all of them were illiterate. One can only recognize and spell his own name, but in desperation he had to test his physical fitness first. It is precisely because the overall cultural level of the team is not high that the word agent is added to the job titles of the selected low-level officers, and their military ranks are also temporary ranks. All the soldiers are now privates, and the acting squad leaders are all temporary corporals. Okay, in view of the tense military situation recently, it is not too late to start training immediately. The little Earl said enthusiastically. Regardless of everyone's opposition, he resolutely pulled the team to the woods outside the town for training, and announced that during the training period, there would be no delay. Camp in the woods. He only brought the 2nd Infantry Battalion and the 1st Inner Guards Platoon, and the 1st Battalion was left in Huixin town to deal with emergencies. After choosing a place, the recruits began to set up camp under the leadership of the veterans. Paul called Knight Claude, now Major Claude, to discuss a training plan. He gave Claude a piece of parchment, filled it with eloquent words, and said proudly, "Look, Claude, have you seen a more genius training plan than this?" Claude took it over and browsed it quickly, and said profusely, "My lord, this kind of training will kill people." "What? How is you reading www.yuyuganshu.com possible? This is already a shortened version with many subjects cut off." "My lord, the intensity of this kind of training is almost comparable to the training I did when I was a knight retinue." "You can take it, why can't they? Nutrition is very important." "My lord, although I was not well off at the time, I could eat meat at least once a week." These soldiers who were born as civilians did not have such conditions. According to the previous food standards, we can only ensure that they are hungry. No stomach, but once the amount of exercise increases, it will be difficult to sustain without eating meat. Paul smacked his forehead. "I didn't even think about this. How about it? I will write a letter and send it to Philip immediately, asking him to strengthen the food supply to our side, especially increase the supply of meat. In addition, I also organize manual hunting every day." Claude laughed. I don't have any complaints, but Butler Philip is probably going to vomit blood again." "Lord, in addition to physical training, there are also confusing words such as standing in a military posture, kicking, and cue training. I can understand it literally, but can you explain it?" Discipline, Claude, have you seen the foolishness in the military parade before? Our army must be uniform, advance and retreat in an orderly manner, and act as a whole at all times, so that it can have momentum, not a group of scattered people. Scattered soldiers. Claude's forehead was sweating. The requirements of the regular army of the kingdom are not so high. "Well, you are right to say so. It's getting late now, so I won't practice other subjects. Let's stand in a military posture before dinner to have an appetizer." He. Looking at the busy soldiers, the eager young earl rubbed his fists while letting out a sinister laugh that sent chills down Claude's spine. There was a cross tied behind Makarov, and he stood upright in extreme torment. "What's the use of this kind of training against pirates? What are you doing?" He had already complained countless times in his heart. I also wanted to turn my head to see what the state of the person next to me was like, but I suppressed this thought as soon as it appeared. There are already several unlucky people who were caught by Knight Claude because of their small movements while standing in a military posture. Oh no, yes, Major Crowder was severely repaired and was fined not to eat. He didn't want to go hungry. The little lord is really weird, Makarov continued to complain in his heart, cleaning out some weird moths. What standing in a military posture and kicking forward, even those officers who were knights were forced by him to practice like this. "Oh, it's okay if I don't mention it," Makarov feels ashamed when he thinks of kicking the goose step. That strange posture still makes him blush. Fortunately, he didn't train in the town, otherwise he wouldn't make the villagers laugh. It is estimated that the little lord is still a patient with severe obsessive-compulsive disorder. His requirements for tidiness and uniformity have reached the point of perversion. It would be too much to fold the quilt into 4 squares. If the little lord hadn't personally demonstrated how to fold and taught the soldiers who folded incorrectly, Makarov once suspected that the little lord was deliberately making fun of them. The only thing that is normal is the assassination training every morning or afternoon, which is guided by Major Claude himself. In Makarov's view, this is the only way he can go into battle to kill the enemy and save his life. He listens to the Major very seriously every time. Explain the essentials and practice hard. Of course, despite all the complaints in his heart, Makarov still respects and even appreciates the little lord, not only because he has eaten meat twice this week, but there is another more important reason: the adults actually taught them how to read and write. Most of the common people don't have the opportunity and financial resources to learn systematically in their lifetime. Of course, there are still quite a few common people who know a lot of characters. For example, people who are engaged in businessmen, bards, noble servants, etc. must know a lot writing, but the number of these people is so rare compared to the huge civilian population. In some remote areas, writing is even recognized by people as the magic of legends. Only nobles and servants of the gods can learn it. Yes, the literacy of many civilians in their lifetime is only limited to being able to recognize their own names, and even more civilians cannot even reach this level. Not only in the human kingdom, I heard that on the prairie, many orc tribes use rope make a knot to record things. Makarov can still clearly recall that when the little lord announced that he would hold a literacy class to teach everyone characters in the evening, the incredulous expressions on everyone's faces and Major Claude's surprise were enough to block his words. The mouth of a goose egg. However, many soldiers actually think that they are only serving as soldiers for food and do not need to read and write. They are really a bunch of fools who are willing to degenerate and do not seek to make progress. Makarov secretly despises him. Suddenly the whistle sounded, and then I heard the battalion commander Major Claude's loud order, "All the troops gather." Makarov immediately discarded all thoughts and moved closer to the pace trooper in front of the major, and stood shoulder to shoulder with the people in the same row. After a week of training, this has almost become a conditioned reflex. "Relax." The major continued to order. Then the little lord came over and began to speak. "Soldiers, you have made great progress this week. I am very pleased. Now your military posture has reached the standard I require. I announce that you don't need to wear a cross when you stand in military posture in the future." After a pause, seeing no one booing and cheering, he nodded in satisfaction. "However, you still have deficiencies. According to Battalion Commander Claude, many people's assassination skills are still not at the point. This way, they cannot fight against the most vicious gangsters. You must continue to practice diligently in the future. Sweat a lot in normal times, and you will not be able to fight against the most vicious gangsters. Less bloodshed. Isn't it because, my lord, you waste half of your training time on standing in the military posture and going forward? Many people complain secretly. And your internal affairs. Every time I speak, I emphasize personal and collective hygiene. This is the last time. If I find that there is littering in the tent of any class again, I swear to let all the people in their class run around the camp to your death. Now, I have a good news to announce. I asked Steward Philip to customize a uniform for us. It was delivered today. I will distribute it to everyone and put it on immediately." Then, under the arrangement of military officers at all levels, everyone stepped forward to receive their military uniforms one by one. The military uniform was designed according to the 8th Route Army uniform of the previous life, but the color is dark green. In addition to the jacket and trousers, there are also hats, leather belts, shoes, foot wraps and leggings. Shoulder straps with rank insignia that can be fastened on the shoulders with buttons. After receiving 2 sets each, the soldiers changed their clothes. Anyway, the people present were all old men, so they didn't have any scruples. After all, this batch of military uniforms was made in a hurry. In order to allow the entire army to wear them, they were made in larger sizes. Many people wore them fatter, but compared to the tattered and patched ones they wore before, immediately raised the spirit of the person by more than one level. After changing their clothes, they regrouped. Although no one spoke due to discipline, the excitement of the soldiers could still be seen. It seemed that the new clothes had greatly improved their morale. Claude looked at the re-established phalanx, feeling deeply moved. A week ago, these people in front of them were still a group of undisciplined farmers, some of them could not even tell the left and right, but now they are standing, sitting and ordering and prohibiting. If it was before, not to mention other aspects, it would be unimaginable just to gather at such a fast speed. Reading www.yuugonshu.com right now. This team already looks like a regular army on the surface. No, the kingdom's regular army can't reach this level either. After putting on new uniforms, in terms of uniformity, only the Royal Guard of Honor that I have never seen can match. Now he gradually understood why the little Earl spent so much time on training that he thought was meaningless before. Claude secretly thought, the only shortcoming now is that nearly half of the people have never seen blood. Paul ordered Claude to continue training according to today's scheduled plan, and then led the servants who came to deliver the military uniforms into a tent guarded by internal guards. "My lord, all the things you want are here. This is the first batch. Philip is still collecting the rest, and it will take some time." "Great, these can already meet the needs of the moment, but we still need to pay close attention to the rest." Boxes were placed on the ground, and there was a smell of sulfur in the tent. He looked at all these with satisfaction, and then asked, "Where is the person I want?" The servant replied respectfully, "They are all waiting in the tent next door." "How about it, are they all reliable?" "Please rest assured, they are all loyal people who have served the adult family for generations like me. Butler Philip has personally tested it." "Very well, Ron, you will still be responsible for delivering supplies here from now on, and I will not treat you badly. But remember, you are not allowed to disclose anything here to anyone, understand?" "Anyone, understand? I understand, I understand. I swear to the Lord of Light that I will keep my mouth shut, and if I leak a word, I will be sent to hell." Ron immediately swore to the sky. "Okay, you go back first, remember what I said." After sending the servant Ron away, Paul happily checked the goods on the ground again. "Haha, how can we be worthy of our identity as a time traveler if we don't use some big killers?" "That's right, these things on the ground are sulfur, charcoal and saltpeter, the raw materials for making black powder. Speaking of black powder, this is really a good thing for home travel and house robbery. What broke the solid armor of Western feudal knights? It is gunpowder. What helped Pizarro conquer the vast Inca Empire? It is gunpowder. And this time, gunpowder will help me, Paul Grayman, to civilize this different world." According to his original idea, he wanted to directly manufacture matchlock guns or flintlock guns in batches, so he asked Philip to gather a large group of blacksmiths, but because spring plowing was approaching, it was time for farmers to make and maintain farm tools. "Let it go. Before I can prove the great significance of my crossage invention, I have to find 1 or 2 blacksmiths to make 2 guns experimentally to open the eyes of these aliens." Some big gun battles, armed with a group of grenadiers. He immediately met the servant who had just arrived in the next tent. "Ron must have told you that you must not reveal a word about anything that happened here, otherwise." He gestured and wiped his neck. Everyone said yes. "Okay, let everyone come here to create a secret weapon. It will be our magic weapon to defeat the enemy. If you do a good job, I will definitely reward you heavily." He pointed to one of the familiar servants, "Kelly, these people will be under your control from now on." Then he took out the gunpowder raw materials he brought over and said, this is what you brought over, saltpeter, sulfur and charcoal. In the eyes of the world, these are very common things, but I accidentally discovered that mixing them in a certain proportion, creating a mixture that burns violently. Without blushing, he took the credit for himself. Then he mixed the 3 raw materials that had already been ground into powder according to the ratio of 1 nitrate, 2 sulfur and 3 charcoals, told everyone to stay away, took out a long matchstick, and used a torch, a kind of fire stick used to preserve fire, tool, to ignite, lightly touch the mixture from a distance. Ah! Everyone exclaimed. I saw that small pile of powder suddenly burst into dazzling flames, followed by a burst of thick smoke, and as the thick smoke spread, an indescribable smell filled the tent. Did you see it? The burning was very violent, and it burned out almost instantly. Indeed, the former mixture has now become a heap of slag. The Lord wants to use this to make a weapon. The clever person has already understood his intention. Yes, I call this mixed powder gunpowder, and it will become our weapon against pirates. But just burning it is not enough, and it will not pose any real threat to pirates, so I plan to put them in a sealed container, so that when it burns, it can produce a strong explosion, thereby killing the enemy. This is just a general idea of mine. This weapon is only in the conceived stage. The specific best gunpowder formula, production process, and the shape and size of the container are more appropriate. Everyone needs to brainstorm. I declare here, in terms of weapon manufacturing in the future, every good idea that I approve will be rewarded with at least 1 silver coin, the greater the value, the more rewards. When everyone heard that there was money to take, their eyes lit up, and they patted their chests to promise that they would not disappoint the Lord. However, you have also seen the experiment just now. This kind of thing is very dangerous. If it is not operated properly, it will not only hurt yourself, but also endanger others, so you must be careful. I will write a safety regulation later, you guys everyone has to memorize it word by word. From now on, I will conduct spot checks from time to time, and those who can't remember will get out of here immediately. Humph! In order to prevent leaks, I'm afraid those who leave here will have to wait too long. It's no longer a normal life. A group of people were coaxed and frightened, and they swore to complete the task of the Lord. Paul summoned an internal affairs soldier and asked him to lead these people to familiarize themselves with the camp environment. Only a few blacksmiths were left behind. He said to one of the older people, I remember your name is Herman, right? You're the blacksmith in the castle. Yes, my lord, the little family has served the Earl's family for generations, and the old Earl's armor was made by the little one. Well, good. You also saw the power of gunpowder just now, how do you feel? Your Earl is truly a genius. If I hadn't seen its raw materials and production method with my own eyes, I would have doubted that it was a legendary magic. Yet, nodding proudly, the admiration of the natives from other worlds made someone's vanity max. Haha, in fact, the weapon idea I just mentioned is just a crude way of using gunpowder. Uuganshu www.uuganshu.com has other more subtle and better ways of using it. Oh? That's why the little ones are staying, right? Please tell the Lord clearly. Paul took out a piece of parchment and unfolded it slowly. Look at this piece of paper, it looks like this. I need you to build a tubular weapon according to the drawing on it. From then on, not far from the training camp, there was an area where ordinary soldiers were forbidden to enter, and the internal affairs soldiers patrolled and guarded it day and night. However, there are often strange explosions coming out of it, which still attracts some curious people to go to explore the secrets, and these people are all invited to drink tea by the newly established picket team without exception. But how can just making some explosive gadgets and small thin iron pipes satisfy the Earl? They stepped up their search for men who were proficient in metal casting, preferably with experience in casting bells, and a good deal of bronze. In addition to the picket team, another team was selected shortly afterwards. The members were all big men with big waists and strong backs. Makarov was also among them. In addition to performing regular training every day, they also arranged special training time for another drill: toss a large pile of lightly polished stones into circles you've drawn on the ground. The name of the new team is Grenadiers. Many people murmured in their hearts, it seems that the training cost was too much a while ago, and the Lord is too poor to afford bows and arrows, but if you use stones to hit the enemy, can't you use a sling with a longer throwing distance? Although I can't throw 2 big stones, but the distance is far enough. Throwing such a big and round stone with your arms, not to mention the short distance, your arms will lose strength after several times. Hansel sat in the carriage in a depressed mood, which had lasted for 2 weeks. More than half a month ago, I received the letter of appointment from the royal family with great joy. When I opened it, I was dumbfounded. He was actually sent to a place that he had never even heard of on weekdays as a permanent representative. The Earl of Lehman, God knows where the birds don't shit. Later, in the barracks, he ran into an old man he had met on the way to escape. He had already settled his affairs and was ready to return. Then he remembered that the Earl of Greymans was not the place where the old man came from. This time I have companions on the road. Hansel's old classmate Matthew appeared again in Hansel's mind. This guy was lucky enough to stay under the princess' command, and he said, although the positions are different, they are all loyal to His Majesty the King. Sarcastic remarks. Bah, 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 Your Royal Highness needs your advice, and I will make the best use of it if I give you a note to keep accounts, and I will not take a pea to reflect on my own virtues. When I think of Matthew, the villain Hansel, I just want to throw up. Steward Ford, who was riding in the same carriage, was full of joy, and things went smoothly. Her Royal Highness readily acknowledged Paul Greyman's succession to the title. In view of the fact that the territory is currently facing the pressure of pirate invasion, the franchise does not need to send troops to serve the king. In the end, he also offered 50 pairs of leather armor and 50 spears. Along the way, Hansel found out the situation of the territory through chatting with Ford's manager. The Greyman family can be traced back to a certain big family in the ancient Bella Empire. After the collapse of the empire, the ancestors of this line established themselves. After several generations, the family followed the founding king of the Aldo dynasty to fight everywhere. Can be regarded as establishing a meritorious family that has shed blood and sweat for the kingdom. It's just that he made a wrong bet in a political struggle for the succession of the throne. At that time, the royal family's control over the local lords was not as weak as it is now. The title was retained after the secret political operation, but the relatively wealthy territory was taken back by the new king, and the whole family was kicked to the barren Northwest Gulf. Since then, the owners of the past generations have been very low-key, and their ties with other families have been decreasing day by day, slowly fading out of the center of the kingdom's political arena. No wonder I haven't heard much about it, Hansel thought to himself. Ah, my life is so gloomy, the unknown country nobles, the unknown back country, there is not even a decent town along the way, full of blood, talent, is it going to be buried like this? The more Hansel thought about it, the more aggrieved he became, and then he hated his own background. If he was not a concubine, if his mother was born better, if... Forget it, there are so many ifs, some things cannot be changed after all, let's finish it first. The current task is to work hard to return to the side of His Majesty the King and His Royal Highness. His efforts will be recognized one day. He quickly adjusted his mentality. The Ford manager next to him looked out the window and said excitedly, "Look, Sir Abbot, in front of you is Lake Arda. In fact, the official name of this land is Ardaland, and the name comes from this lake. We are going to Huxon town." As the trees on the side of the road gradually decreased, a large lake appeared in front of them, and the opposite bank could hardly be seen. There was a huge island in the water near them, and many buildings were distributed on it, except for the castle standing in the center of the island. In terms of size, it is a relatively large town. Hansel slandered, "This town is the capital of an earldom? It's not as good as the countryside near the capital." In fact, this can only be blamed on Hansel's lack of knowledge. In this era, many lords built their castles in this way, either on cliffs or on isolated islands surrounded by water. Some places that are easy to defend and difficult to attack can prevent bandits, rebellion of the local people, and the coveting of the lord next door. It's just that young nobles in the capital like Hansel generally haven't been out of the circle around Jinjao Castle at their age. Even if they travel far, they will take the bustling commercial roads along the way, so naturally they have never seen such a scene. Walking into the lake, I found a huge pontoon bridge on the water. The pontoon bridge is spliced together with special boats as nodes. It seems that if the enemy comes to attack, the boat can be dismantled immediately, so that the enemy cannot pass through. Should we get out of the car and walk to the island? Hansel was very worried about whether the pontoon bridge would be able to support the passage of the carriage. Ford's supervisor next to him heard his worry, and after laughing, he patted his chest and said, "Abbot, please rest assured, this pontoon bridge is very strong, and a carriage is nothing to worry about." Seeing the local people's reassurance, Hansel was a little relieved, but he still sat on the carriage and crossed the pontoon bridge. After arriving on the island, he was completely relieved. Then, "Your Excellency Abbot, I need to report to the Lord first. Please follow my servant to the castle guest room to rest. I will arrange for you to meet with the Lord right away." "Yes, Mr. Ford." The carriage slowly drove into the gate of the castle wall, and I saw Butler Philip walking towards this side. "Boss Ford, you are back." "Butler Philip, it's just right, take me to see the Count." "Hey, I was just about to mention the Earl to you. Did something happen?" Manager Ford's heart twitched. It couldn't be that Grayman's old injury had relapsed. "My lord has led the newly recruited soldiers out for training, and it may take a few days before they return to Huxon town." "What, you just let him lead a group of recruits out? Don't you know how arrogant the pirates are outside?" "I've said everything, but I still haven't persuaded them. Everyone had to let Master Claude lead the castle's guards to accompany him for protection." Only then did Butler Ford feel relieved, and he immediately said, "Send someone to find the Earl quickly, and say that the Royal Commissioner has arrived and is waiting for his reception." "Yes, I'll send someone to look for it right away." Butler Philip bowed to Hansel and left in a hurry. Steward Ford turned around and said to Hansel, "I'm very sorry, Mr. Abbot, it seems that you can only wait for a while." "Gone. It doesn't matter. Since the Earl won't come back for the time being, if you don't mind, can I walk around here?" "Of course it is possible. You are a distinguished guest from afar. Please treat this place as your own home." "But I also need to go home, so I won't accompany you around." Then, Manager Ford appointed his own servant as Hansel as your guide. He took his leave and went home. Hansel wanted to drink something, so he told the guide to take him and Tommen to the tavern in the town. There were quite a lot of people in the tavern, and the guests were talking about it. Suddenly a well-dressed son walked in. Some well-informed people had already judged from the clothes that he must be a nobleman, and he was followed. "Isn't it the servant of Manager Ford?" The bowed appearance proved that this person's identity is not simple, and the conversation in the tavern suddenly became quieter. "Boss, bring me 3 beers. I hope the glasses are unused." "Yes, sir, please wait a moment, the younger one will go to prepare right away." The tavern owner in his 40s had never had such close contact with nobles from other places at his age, so he was in a panic and hurried to prepare beer. People in small places have little knowledge. Hansel laughed inwardly. He found a seat by the window, asked Tommen to spread a cloth on the seat and the table, and then sat down. The tavern is a good place to inquire about news. Since everyone is here, he doesn't intend to just sit and drink, but how should he ask? At this moment the proprietor brought over 3 glasses of beer. He took one himself, and let Tommen and the flattered guide share the remaining 2. He looked at the customers around him, and saw that most of them were avoiding his gaze, for fear that some impolite gesture would make the nobleman unhappy. There was only one person who was sneaky and secretly turned his head to look at him from time to time. "You, come here." "Yes, it's you, the one in the fur hat." "Me." The young man pointed out by Hansel quickly turned from astonishment to fear. Did his peeping behavior make the nobleman angry? "What should I do? Will I be beheaded?" The people sitting around the young man distanced themselves from him one after another, fearing that it would affect him. He came to Hansel tremblingly, knelt down as soon as he stopped, and kowtowed desperately while weeping, "Master, I was just curious for a while, I really don't mean any harm, please look at me." Okay, it scares you, and I don't want to do anything to you. It's just asking a few words, asking about something. Get up." Only then did the young man stand up as if he had been pardoned. "Sit there." Hansel pointed to the empty seat next to him. "This, how dare you? Sit down as long as the Baron asks you." The servant Tommen acted as the dog's leg at the right time. The young man had no choice but to sit down and thank you. "I ask you, is the situation about pirates really serious right now?" "Yeah, you reading www.yuyuganshu.com. Although it hasn't appeared in this area yet, everyone is getting more and more afraid. Now even walking between villages and towns requires a large group of people to accompany each other. Is your lord just letting them go?" "That's not true. I guess you've heard that the old lord died during the campaign against pirates. The new lord announced the recruitment of soldiers as soon as he took over the position. He wanted to settle accounts with them both publicly and privately. I heard that your new lord is just a child who hasn't grown up. Yeah, I don't know if I can take on the burden. To be honest, Master Paul, he is our current little earl. He was spoiled by the old earl when he was a child. Mischievous things." The young man suddenly kept silent. "In other words, there is also a nobleman in front of him. If you say that to another nobleman in front of him, he is still your own lord, isn't it causing trouble for yourself?" Hansel smiled. He asked the boss to serve the young man a glass of beer, comforted the young man, and after inquiring for a while, he suddenly felt that the little lord here was quite an interesting person. For example, at the beginning of his accession to the throne, he ordered that defecation is not allowed anywhere. In addition to encouraging every household to build their own toilets, he also paid for the repair of several public toilets in the town. A large box called a trash can is placed at intervals on the street. Pedestrians and residents must empty the garbage into the garbage can. The Lord's mansion organizes people to clean up the garbage every day. Hansel had a high opinion of this little lord. That's not bad. It's unexpected that a mere country lord is more particular than the nobles in the royal capital. I hope he doesn't have all the problems of those country bumpkin nobles. He stood up, rewarded the young man with a few coins, and beckoned Tommen and the guide to continue to visit other places.